This is just a reminder for anyone who's still interested in purchasing the self-paced intuitive eating course bundle that comes with a 90-minute intensive work with me. That expires literally this week. If you're listening to the podcast in real time, May 2023, that offer is gone on the 31st. So don't wait, hop into the show notes right now. Pause the episode, I totally get it. Or keep it going while I'm talking and head in there. Make sure you grab that before the offer expires. Now, let's head into this episode and talk about the consequences of orthorexia. Welcome to the Intuitive Eating Mama podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer D'Amato. I am an intuitive eating counselor and I'm also a mom to 4. This podcast is not just for mamas, it's for all women who are ready to ditch diets, ditch the scale and food guilt forever, and instead invite peace with food, increase their body trust, and confidence in all of her choices. I believe this show is going to shed some light on sneaky ways diet culture has infiltrated your thoughts, your family, and your well-being. No matter the episode, I want you to walk away feeling informed, inspired, and encouraged. So whether you're taking a walk, washing the dishes, or carting kids around, let's dive into the latest episode on the Intuitive Eating Mama podcast. So when I asked on Instagram, what listeners wanted to hear on the podcast, and I put out there okay, personal story, do you want to hear that? I was surprised how many said yes. Now I share personal stuff all the time, right? I talk about my journey, my relationship with food, my relationship with my body. I get most of the struggles, not all of the struggles. I can't. This is me, one person. I can't understand everything. I can be empathetic, compassionate, and a great listener, but I can't understand everything. I do have my own story though, and I don't expect everyone to even understand my story. However, when I was asked by listeners to share a personal story, I was like, what am I going to talk about? There's so many things I've talked about already. What am I going to talk about? And then I went to the gym. And somehow content just seemed to create itself right there. So I've been walking and doing some intentional walking. I guess that's what I'm calling it. My husband has a Peloton, so I'm using the app and doing some of the walks. I modify for what works for me, but I love right now I want someone to tell me what to do with it. I don't want to go on there and just do it myself. So I'm enjoying that, fun music, and then I do some lifting. Nothing heavy. And I really try to pay attention to my body as much as I can, what feels good, what feels also like a little bit of a stretch and a push and somewhat challenging. So shortly after I'd asked this question on Instagram, I was like, well, I'm going to do some back pull downs. I'm going to do a little bit of shoulder work. And I'm usually really aware of shoulder work. And so I picked a pretty light weight to do some shoulder presses, standing shoulder presses. And the content was created for this podcast. I've talked about orthorexia and this obsessive health-related decision-making, choices, thoughts. It is disordered eating. Let me explain that even. I feel like I got to back up just one click here. So if you think about a spectrum, a line, you will have what I would call more of a normal eating. Then that can enter into dieting. Dieting can progress into disordered eating. Disordered eating progresses into an eating disorder. Can you follow that? Orthorexia is this really interesting one. It is not actually a DSM. This is my psychology degree coming in for y'all. It is not a diagnosed eating disorder. But if you picture that same line, that spectrum I shared with you, and you picture that space in between disordered eating and an eating disorder, it literally is where orthorexia lives. I've said it for quite some time. I think in my lifetime, sooner than later, we'll see orthorexia become a diagnosed eating disorder. The reason I believe that is it really is disordered eating, disordered thinking, and really has some very scary consequences to your overall well-being, mental health, emotional health, and one of the things I wanted to share today, the consequences of orthorexia physically. I've talked about the disordered thinking when it comes to orthorexia, literally sacrificing everything in the name of health, not just the food, the going out, who I would surround myself with. I was up, I can still visually, like my husband looking at me like, are you sure you want to do this? I'm up at 3:30 in the morning to go to the gym to meet people. And I just want you to understand, like I had to get up early enough to force down 20 ounces of water before I would allow myself to leave the house. Oh yeah, disordered thinking is deeply connected to disordered eating. Disordered eating is not happening in a bubble. It's happening because there's so much disordered thinking happening. And I've talked about those consequences to my sleep, to my relationships, to my well-being. But as I was working out, I started thinking, I'm living in the consequences maybe for the rest of my life. The injury that I literally would not allow myself to rest from. I have sciatic nerve issues and major shoulder issues, all consequences from orthorexia. And those are just a couple of the physical. Like there's some other minor things, but those two I notice whenever I do anything. Is my sciatic nerve can easily be aggravated now. And it was one of those things where I was doing really, really heavy lifting. It was not bad form. Oh, and I know this because I would video myself. Yes, yes, yes. It was not about bad form. It was about lack of rest days. It was about lack of rest in general. It was about the constant movement, the earn and burn mentality that led to the you need to be doing this all the time. My rest days were a joke. I I would call them rest days and do all cardio. I would call them rest days and lift really, really light. So I never gave my body recovery time. I never gave it rest. I mean, I had to close the rings. I had to make sure I burned enough calories. So I have a very similar issue with my shoulders, specifically my right shoulder, that the lifting was so extreme, the lifting without resting, the obsessiveness about how my body looked, the physique, constantly in the mirror. I mean, constantly in the mirror, picking every single inch apart. I have this shoulder constant pain when I lift. So I go really, really light. And here's the part where people want to know why sometimes you have to take a complete break, like break up with any type of movement, exercise, working out that you were doing when you were struggling with orthorexia and didn't know it. I had to take the break partly for the healing, right? Partly to give my body rest, but I had to work on disconnecting like all of my thoughts about my body and about exercise and about what my body should look like, what I should be doing. I mean, I had to really work through that word should, that one word that kept me so stuck, so much in pain, physically, mentally, and emotionally in pain. I took that break. I took the break for the physical healing, but to do the work I needed to do mentally. It really, it really messes with you when you are completely like intertwined. Yes, we have this intertwined relationship with food and body, but this intertwined relationship also with your body and working out, exercise, movement, whatever word you're using here. I had to disconnect exercise from losing weight, from changing my physique, that it was even only about building muscle, right? Because that became my complete focus. Have to get fit, have to get lean, have to have muscle. Like that is the only way my body is desirable. That is the only way I'm going to look good. And if I build more muscle, I'll keep losing more weight.
we know the end result. The end result, the backfiring, the consequences, but that was mentally what I had to undo. So taking that break, I just want to encourage you, if you're in that space where exercise of any kind is so intertwined with weight loss, how your body looks, with your relationship with food, and you need to take a break, or you're in that break but you're feeling guilty, I just want to encourage you right here in this moment, the break might be completely necessary as part of your healing. Walking away from it, no pun intended, stopping altogether can be part of the healing journey. Do I believe our bodies like to move? Sure. If you are able-bodied, if you can move, I believe our bodies like to move. All the fluids and the joints and our bones and our muscles, yes, our bodies are meant to move. But that movement doesn't need to be a workout routine, an exercise routine, a set number of days you go to a gym. It doesn't have to look that way. And to get to a place where you're not squeezing it, to a chokehold and you're holding it more lightly, you might have to completely step away. I've done this twice for two different reasons. One, right at the beginning, really having to do some work. And the second, just because I just felt like my body was speaking, take a break, you need a break. Man, going back after the break feels so good. All right, I don't know if this spoke to you, and maybe you never had struggled with disordered eating and thinking to this degree, to the health obsession, but maybe you have found yourself so intertwined with exercise and weight loss, or you live in the shoulds. I should be working out more. I should be doing this. I should be exercising. I should. And you just needed to do some reflection on what would it be like if that word, that one word, were removed. If you took a rest mentally, emotionally, and physically. Now, when I talk about these consequences, and yes, my body is living in these, I'm not sitting there dwelling on this. I'm just modifying. I'm listening so much better to my body. There are days where I'm like, that walk is more than enough. I'm done. I feel so good. And I take actual, real rest days. I want you to know this is something that comes up in my group coaching all the time. The intuitive health reboot literally is, it's like a reboot, like stop everything and start over where you are right now. And that might be the rest. It might be incorporating new movement. It might just not be moving very much at all while you're undoing the intertwining of exercise and your body. I love being able to really help women sort through that, right? We sort through our relationship with food and how it relates to our body, but we also have to sort through those messages about exercise and working out. There can be a lot to unpack there. It's why, in that group setting, one woman might bring something up and another woman's like, oh my gosh, I thought it was just me. I thought I was the only one who struggled with that. And think about how good that feels to know you're not alone, and then have a plan, have something to help you work through that. Oh, my favorite part of the week. All right. I hope this was helpful for you. I would love to hear from you if it was helpful, or if you have a question. You can always hit me up in the DMs on Instagram, or if you're in my private Facebook group, you can actually post directly in that group, whether it's anonymous, you put your name to it, and we can talk about this topic a little bit more in depth there. Everything you would ever need is in the show notes below this episode. I can't wait to be right back here next week.